Hey, what's up, guys? We're going to be doing the trade recap from this week here. Hopefully, everyone did well. It was an excellent week for me personally. A lot of this was due to swing trades. I had some really nice intraday trades as well, but those were, pretty scarce. I didn't really do too much with that. Tesla, AMD, Google. If you guys traded NVIDIA, which was a great idea, Shop, which was a great idea, I personally didn't get on those. Those did well. QQQ, SPY did really well. I know I had a couple misses on those that were just essentially, I like to call them stab trades, where I just take some profits. I look to see if I can catch potential reversals or continuations that are a little bit more high risk. But nonetheless, the bigger trades, or the ones that I planned for, did really well, a lot of those being those swings. But wanted to review AMD here, right? So this was essentially the trade setup. I took the trade, if you guys go to the Discord, I took this here on the 25th of October. I started December's of 125, okay? I still think this has potential room to climb, especially when you have the constriction of price like this, and it came in the form of a wedge. Um, but you also had, right, the breakout of the top trend line, right? It really got close to making a break through these weekly highs here, but it rejected and sold down and gave what looked like a retest off the 200. I assume a lot of buyers were here, so it sold under, and that might have been what created enough pressure in the pressure cooker that really started this ramp up alongside of the earnings that came. But really, right, I think I grabbed it on the 25th, somewhere in these lows here. And what I was trying to do was I was trying to grab this little range here. You guys can see this little pocket of consolidation on the daily. It did pull under, but that's why it's important to, I talk about this a lot, and it's in the video that I did too, understanding what kind of trade you're taking, understanding the duration and how far away that trade is, and defining a risk. So even though I took this on the 25th and it broke under here, I didn't really panic because my risk was this 93.22 spot. I think it was actually here. I think it was like 92.9 or something. Yeah, 92.93. How I got that level, if you guys didn't know, right, if we go to the weekly chart, it was this fair value gap here, right? So we have this green line, right? Remember, fair value gaps are 3-bar patterns, and you don't want to just take them on every single thing. They need to be very important candles that create imbalances, like a legit imbalance. This was a very imbalanced candle, massive, massive breakout, good volume, created of 1, 2, 3, right? So we have in between this wick and this wick an imbalanced range. Now, the reason I didn't really look to start it here is this flag really created a balanced range, right? And that balance came from this candle here. You guys can see the huge uptick in volume that came in the form of a weekly hammer, right? That started this big move. So we can consider this low and pretty much this entire mid-range a balanced kind of start, or a chart. I almost said start. I don't know why I said that. But now, right, I was looking for the start of this weekly candle. You guys can see this weekly candle, the high of this weekly candle, and then the fair value gap where it initially started here, right? At this range should hold. This should be a very valid weekly support, and that was my risk, right? And I'm risking that this trades back into what was supposed to be the balanced range. That would have invalidated the trade, and I would have stopped. So that being said, it did break the level that I added on a big daily level, but I didn't really panic. I told everybody I was just going to incrementally add on this trade as long as it stayed above 92.9. So let's say this did break down under it. I wouldn't close right away. I would just kind of hold still, not add to it right away. I know a lot of people panic when they see something break risk and they'll either close or they'll average down very heavily. I just would have waited and then let the daily candle close because you'll get a lot of those liquidity traps and things like that, or just candle traps. So I was patient. And I remember I believe I added on one of these 2 days, right? So we got a large bar here, inside bar, inside bar. So we had a double inside bar. I didn't want to go too heavy. This was probably the only thing I regret, just because there was that, binary event with earnings. There was a potential that this misses, and this sells off pretty drastically, and I have no control over that. That's an awful feeling. Now, if you guys remember where this ended up traveling to, which is pretty crazy, right? If we can just draw these levels by eye or by hand. Remember I said that this daily low was very pivotal here. Here at like 95, if we go to a 15-minute chart, this is exactly where it sold off into for earnings, if I'm not wrong. You guys can see, right? Here we go. In between this green, right, the 93 level that I had as the risk, and the 90 what, 95? range, right? It just kind of dropped into here and just sat here. It didn't go any lower. I think they accumulated more shares down here, whatever the case may have been. And you can see whatever they had, that was the final stage of, collecting inventory, and then they sent the price up. Probably had a lot of the ask just sitting up here ready to sell. I mean, even today, it didn't really look like there was much that they're looking to sell. So this can get marked up even further, especially with the strength in like SMH. We have NVIDIA reporting. Chips look on fire, to be honest. But yeah, this was an insane trade. Remember this day, I really didn't start to trim until we got into this upper range here. I'll just do this little guy right around here. I think that's where I took a large portion of my profits around that 90% mark. And I didn't think it would go much higher. I remember my target on this trade was like 105. Now 105, reason for that, if we go to the daily really quickly, I was just looking for top of this range right here. Okay, go ahead and slice this over. It was just that, right? It was the left shoulder here, which would have been like a left shoulder pop head, which is the weekly highs, which was my flex target. You guys should have remembered that it was like 110, 111. But I was a little worried of this right shoulder here. And I just didn't think it had the juice to continue all in 1 week. So I took a large amount of profits off at that 90% mark. I think I had like one contract left. And then, of course, right, once you start to see something pull back down, you already only have a contract left. Sometimes, I do hold that. Other times, it really just kind of depends. So this was one of those circumstances where I was like, okay, hey, this next day, right, it opened up right around this range, right where I took profits. It doesn't look super strong. It did pop up a little bit more, but then it consolidated. I just decided to take profits full. This is where it's tough, right? I mean, I should have held on to a contract or two because this doesn't expire till December. The strength of that daily candle, like this is massive, guys. And I really shouldn't have closed until it broke under this consolidated spot here where I took initial profits. And maybe could have even added, especially on this little spike down here. Definitely could have probably added some more exposure on a further dated contract, or I could have gotten more aggressive with strikes today. But yeah, I mean, this trade did go a little bit higher, as you guys can see. It pushed all the way to that 111.35 weekly resistance, and it actually broke it, retested, and then went even higher to 113.39. But man, yeah, this thing still looks fantastic. This will be a focal point of mine for, I think, a little bit longer. I mean, you can't really ignore that weekly chart. If anything, right, it might pull back down. I don't even know. Maybe pull down to like this weekly high here, or this weekly high from back here, 1023. That doesn't seem likely though, just for how how coiled this weekly chart was. This looks good for continuation, in my honest opinion. Back up towards these weekly highs, right, and then from there, look good up to these weekly highs up at like 132. So I'm gonna probably look to get back into this trade with some more size. But for now, obviously I closed that trade out. Fantastic trade. I won't look back on it. Don't really regret it either. But yeah, that's how that one worked out. Let's jump into. I want to review Google. Google was something I traded 4 or 5 times this week. Pretty sick trade. So I want to take a look at that one. Okay, so this is Google's chart. We're going to chart this live. So I always talk about how liquidity controls the market, right? Big banks, big institutions, whatever you want to call them, they need liquidity in order to get fills, right? If they want to buy something, they need someone selling, and vice versa. And there's a lot of times if you want to move $500 million worth of Google or Meta, it's going to be hard to find another bank that's looking to sell that much, right? So that comes in the form of retail investors. It's easy to get a large collection of cattle all herded to one spot, and you can take off big chunks of that right at one time and then slowly accumulate or sell over a period of time and find matches for your orders in other ways, right? But they do look for big areas of liquidity, and they trade objectively, okay? So that they look for objectives on the weekly and the daily chart. So Google had this massive sell-off from earnings. You guys can obviously see big gap down. That's not always bearish, right? They had a double beat. What that might have meant is that they had a collection of inventory going into earnings, which is binary even for them. They speculate what will happen. Obviously, there is insider trading, and they know what will happen at times, but they have a lot of inventory here to be able to dictate price. There's a beat, right? Okay, hey, there's a big beat here. What we can do is just resell this, push it back down to a good buy zone, because I'm sure some of these guys grabbed in here, they grabbed along the way here. It's called a campaign, right? They're building a position, and once they have enough, right, things look good, let's just sell this thing off and, recollect at a better level, right? They were probably bidding the market down here as they sold their shares, so they simultaneously sell, and then they're bidding for price to go down to where there's buyers because they're buying their own stuff back. It's not always just them doing that, right? I mean, there's a collection of different people for different reasons doing this, but I wanted to mark out, right, that the big pull on the market here, the big objective on the weekly, was a push down to fill this gap. And I'm sure as it pushed down, yeah, there's some sells that pushed it under ever so slightly, but still, right? Oh, there's a gap down here, I just noticed. But still, the goal was to get this down here, right? And then they could reaccumulate the inventory. So that was first step, right? I was looking for this to trade down to the gap. And then obviously I was looking for some kind of anomaly candle, a hammer, some kind of signal that buyers are here and they're intending to potentially reverse this. And I started to see signs here on 1027. I really liked how that hammer looked, and I was like, okay, this is something to look at now. We probably have buyers stepping in. And that's when it became on the watch list. Now, I didn't take this trade till 10:30, okay? So remember, you don't always want to buy the lows. We're not trading with millions of dollars. We can't move the market like the big guys can. We want to follow the footprints that they have. So I saw the signs here. We'll go ahead and mark that out where I was like, okay, I'm interested in this chart now, okay? Sorry, that looks probably really bad. And there we go. Mark that out. Now, what ended up happening is 10:30, so on Monday, what did we end up basing? Right? We ended up basing a very clean gap, right? We started to get clear bidder that went and bid here. Now they're aggressive in bidding here. And we got the daily close over the gap there. Now I was very, very curious about this because we have another little area here that where we get like kind of like a pinch, right? What you'd want to see is sellers, if there was a true seller, right, and the intention was to sell this, they would want to protect this gap, right? I always talk about progress. They want to protect the progress that they made on this big gap down as much as they could, right? You want to see volume come in. And what I really noted here was that this upper wick didn't have any volume backing the rejection. It was just kind of like a meh. We'll push it back a little bit. There was no real intention behind protecting this gap, right? Because there's a gap between here and then here, and it still held in buyer's bid above this weekly level here. This is a little bit off. There we go. So I was like, oh crap, this is looking like it's going to be a legit reversal, especially if the sellers don't step in, right? The following day, what did we end up getting? A rest day, right? Where they did wick it under this level, but what do we get? A pushback above, candle close. Volume is once again low. So this indicated that, hey, buyers are very interested in stepping up, right? Because they had the hammer, the consecutive follow-up in defense of the gap, the second day. And I remember I called this on live. I ended up mentioning, hey, like I want to see, a 1, 2, 3, where we have an initial hold, a rest day, and then a continuation. And then that continuation should give us a secondary as long as this high is defended up here, which we ended up getting. But we got the beautiful second day rest day, right? And then also we got clear sign that, hey, buyers are here, man. They 100% want to hold this gap. There was actually, oh gosh, that looks so bad. I'm sorry. 1 second. There was a clear reasoning and purpose for sellers trying to get it under here, and they just didn't have the effort to do it. So now we have 2 days of closing inside this gap. We have a nice hammer here, and we're pinched in between the weekly objective and then obviously this gap here. Now, following day, I'm looking for us to open above this level one more time or above the close and just push. That's our continuation day, and of course we got a big move out, right? We ended up going from the open here at 124 and got a press out to 126.48. Beautiful, right? But now we're expecting what to happen. And I talk about this a lot. Sorry, I don't really use Thinkorswim that much. I'm actually transitioning back to this platform to be using this. We're looking for this to push down, right? And then push out, back up, right? And that's what we're kind of looking for. Maybe a higher low and then a push out again. I always draw these out just so you guys can visualize the trade. But now that we broke the gap, right, we have a continuation day here. What we're looking for, I talk about this a lot, is for the second consecutive day for this to continue pushing and trending. We'd ideally want to see this high just kind of hold, right, which we did. It didn't even break that. But worst case scenario, I just drew it out. We get the push back down, and then we continue out, right? We get a big move out. But everybody that's watching, what's our next target? What's our next goal? right? So we want to have this level hold. We'll mark this out green. I usually do purple, so we'll keep it purple. We'll keep it as like I usually have. So the previous day high is purple. Where do we want to see price trade to for another continuation, for a 2-bar continuation? Ideally, you guys said this gap, right? That's next target. What ends up happening? Open above, pulls down just a little bit, doesn't even get close to the previous day high. It actually keeps the gap that it held, and then it pushes out, ends up making its way into the gap. Beautiful. We hit a 128.30 something. I think we hit like 128.95, basically 129, right? Now this is where I'm expecting sellers to maybe come in, be able to shut this thing down a little bit, right? Because now you've lost, lost this progress, you've lost this progress, and now you're going to lose this progress. I expect to see some consolidation here, but today was a nice sign, right, where we got a close over the gap. You guys can see that this day closed under the gap, but now we have a close over the gap. So what we'd be looking for is some kind of consolidation and hold over 128.32. I wouldn't mind a couple days of just sitting here, and then what you'd want to do is see natural progression back towards this target here, right, and just rerun the highs. That's all this is. You might get something here, right, where you get like this weekly pivot that ends up getting traded to and rejecting and then maybe pulling it back down. So if it does hit that, I would just look for like a higher low somewhere in the gap for a re-entry on these. But I mean, Google looks fantastic. This is definitely trading with a purpose, and it's sold off with a purpose in my opinion, and that's to rerun it back to those highs with just more inventory now that they were able to collect at a better level, right? That's all trading is, guys. It's just trading and trying to grab better levels. So hopefully this helped you guys out. I mean, really, this was perfect, man. I traded it here. I traded it here. As it broke out, I trimmed, and then I re-entered today, right? I think I entered today when it closed into the gap, right? This was one of my only trades today. I did hedge with QQQ, which ended up being a loss, but a hedge, if you guys don't know, right, it's usually be typically light size. I ended up going green on those by about 25, 28%. I know some people made about like 60. That's awesome. That's incredible. I wasn't sized up enough to be able to do that. I think I had 6 to 8 contracts, so I did take a loss on that for like 120. But Google was a very nice trade. But yeah, I mean, even right here, just looking at this morning, it was right around here, right, where we ended up pushing out based on the gap, pushed up again. Got a nice little fill here where it came within like, I think it came like 20, 25%. But let's go. God, I'm not used to Thinkorswim. But then what it ended up doing, right, is it pushed back down, and we ended up getting a very nice higher low, right? But this isn't like the perfect trend line, but remember, we want to look for structure where we got to close over the gap, pushed out, pulled down. And this is where I said, like, hey, it didn't close under risk, right? Risk is low a day. Let the trade go to low a day. And there was a reason that I did this, because there was the potential that we could sell under the gap initially. You got to realize that, sellers had been getting their ass kicked in the last 3 gaps or the last 3 natural progression levels. This is another gap that's about to be claimed or, breaking based on. I would expect sellers to maybe push it under and then, try to fight for that higher low from bulls, which we got. But you have to be really willing to see some kind of drawdown on this. It's not going to just be picture perfect every time, guys. I'm sorry. I know some people got stopped out of this, but there's a reason I took the 1110 contracts, and that was to be able to withstand some kind of sell pressure off this gap. We did get that, but we held the higher low, and it didn't really pressure us at all, right? I mean, I think I said stops should be around 0.3. Pretty sure contracts came to 3.1, but still, you want to eyeball them out. You don't have to put a hard stop on these all the time. It never broke risk here at 127.85, the low a day, and you can just see the natural progression here. Just higher low, ended up slowly making its way back above and closing each 5-minute bar over the gap one more time, right, and just slowly progressed. And then eventually we ended up getting a nice pop all the way out here to 129.54. That was pretty much, where a lot of people should have taken profits. You don't have to. I mean, there's a lot more room to go, as you guys know, right, as we noted on the daily. But just really depends on your system, how you want to trade your port. I did take a good portion of my profits. I did swing too, so we'll see how those end up going. But it did sell back off. But we got the daily candle close over the gap. So like I said, I assume we get some kind of consolidation here. Potential for a gap up, but I would actually like to see some consolidation Just, a nice bid or base built here above this gap. But that was trade number 2. Milked this thing a lot, like I said. So hope you guys enjoyed that little explanation. This was a fun one. Let's jump into Tesla now. Oh, okay, Tesla. Let me just start by saying I'm really glad we added time on this. I think I might have been just overzealous with the gap down. At the time, too, if you guys don't remember, just looking at the chart now, obviously everyone's mind should be refreshed where I took the ads, right? Initially, I took it here, 1019. As soon as we pushed down and hit this gap fill. And like I said, I might have been overzealous just knowing that we filled the gap. I was looking for a quick bounce. Thank God we took further dated cons. But really, if you guys remember, there was a dark pull print that was pushed up here around like 2, I think it was a little bit shy. I think it was like 233 something. But I was looking for the entirety of the gap to get filled. And then trade, obviously, it's back to like 270, right? 270, 268, 86. That was, the lower high on the weekly. Just a good area, I think, for this to trade back towards up in this range. But yeah, dark pull print somewhere in this range filled the gap, and I ended up taking this very early. I think I was down right away on this. But luckily, I mentioned, right, a January contract, you need to incrementally add into these. Don't add bulk all at once. Just pepper in every daily or weekly level. And really, for a 120, a January or something that has 2 to 3 months on it, you really want to just focus on daily candle closes and weekly. And it's definitely my fault for adding right here. It's just kind of like I said, an overzealous entry. I mean, it is what it is. But I added 1019, thought the gap would give us a nice bounce. It did not. And it's important not to really panic, right? For a January contract, as I said, I was looking mainly at daily/weekly closes. So immediately we saw a drawdown in a push/break under this 216.64 spot. It retested it on pretty abysmal volume. This was a pretty good day here, actually. Did finish in somewhat of a doji candle, but it looked like a 2-bar bear flag in a retest/rejection off of the gap. If you guys can't tell, right? Just a 2-bar push, test the gap, and then it sold off again. And I wasn't really panicked here. This is actually where I was my most calm, and I was just looking to add either one off of this low here as it got close to that, and then tying that into this weekly spot. Now, if I can zoom out really quickly, we should all already know, though, that 200 on Tesla is a major psych level. So it was honestly kind of nice to see it come under a little bit. The weekly was 198.28, and I'll zoom out really quickly so you guys can see my levels, right, and I can explain them. You guys can see this nice weekly low here. A couple of these wick through, but for the most part, a lot of the bodies closed over, so that's really what I wanted to use as my weekly basis. So you can see here, weekly low, weekly low, weekly low, minus the wicks, and then we had low, low, low. These days, really just chop through. I think this was like a nice equilibrium here, so that is okay, whatever, that's in the air. But you had a weekly high here, weekly high here. This was a weekly high, weekly low, which really started the aggressive move up, which was what I like to see. So this is a very respected level. Don't know what really happened in this range here from last October. But then even here, this was amazing to see. It came down, bounced off the level, created a lower high. Although, it did create a lower high, this was still, once again, a highly respected level. And you can see here, pushed up, push down. This was the sell-off, and I already just kind of knew, right, that this was a big weekly spot, and it also coincided with the gap, which is why I added at that gap very early. But once it broke under the gap, this is why I didn't really panic, right? We can take a look, same exact thing. We had a weekly low here, kind of, well, this was pretty close, but weekly low, right? It did break down, but it retested the weekly low, retested again. So I know this is a valid level in terms of a previous support now acting as resistance, and this is what created that big flush. This is what we want to see, right? This is what created that big move down, pushed up, rejected, pushed up, wick through, closed under, pushed up. This was a major spot, guys. It broke down again, retested, rejected on this weekly wick, closed above, retested, broke down, made its way up, rejected, and then it closed over. I don't want to be annoying or anything like that, but that's important to look at for relevance of a level. How many times did it wick off? How many times did it try to fight to close over? Was it a retest or reject? How many times does it gravitate towards this price, and does it create a big movement after it claims it or rejects it. This was a huge spot. And if we go back to the daily here, right, we saw it push down and come down to this level. And I remember I talked to everybody, I think it was live trading, but it was a really awesome thing to see. And this is why I called for 214 and why I ended up swinging Tesla. If you guys didn't know, I also added to my Tesla. I took more aggressive contracts. I think they were 11.17s or 11. They were 11.10s. That's what it was. 2.15s overnight. And why I took that was obviously this hammer here, right? This was a nice clean hammer, but it was this swing low break, right? This was what the bears had tried to push it under, because this is what initially caught. So this sold down, it caught, it retested, then it sold through and it made a new low right underneath this level here. Now, once it made that new low, it did catch our level that we were talking about, 198.28. It broke the 200 psych level. People probably got a little overzealous on the short side now, right? So now it pushed back over. We had a candle trap here. Well, I wouldn't call this a trap necessarily, but what ended up happening is it just, closed over the level. It didn't close under. Same with this day, barely closed under. And I think this is probably the candle where a lot of people went heavy short, expecting a continuation maybe down to this level. Who knows what they were looking for, but now this day it gets to close over. Volume's pretty decent. It's not super, heavy in the sense that sellers were continuing to push it down, and then you had a hammer right off of our level. So this is where I started the swing. And then if you guys remember, on a Wednesday, Thursday, it's always good to look at your weekly candle, and it's okay to try to predict. You obviously don't want to trade with a bias, but I remember looking at this on this day as this was closing, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is looking like a weekly candle liquidity sweep. And it's important to acknowledge that stuff and look at that stuff, because what ended up happening is this large wick. Let me change this out real quick. Oh, what is this? There we go. Zoom in. This wick right here, guys. It was just underneath this low here. So obviously this candle finished up a little bit higher, but you can see this forming out already without Thursday or Friday's action. And I was like, oh man, this thing does not look good for bears, especially if a bear is seeing exactly what I'm seeing. Oh, let's zoom it out again. If a bear is seeing exactly what I'm seeing on a Wednesday, you're like, oh man, this weekly does not look good, right? You're going to close out your shorts. And if you end up closing out your short to get out of the way of the freight train that could potentially be coming on a Thursday, Friday, right, you're also going to aid and add fuel to that fire by, giving bullish momentum. There's going to be a potential short cover. So that's what I started to see on Wednesday, and that's a big reason why I took that trade. I would tested a couple people, because a lot of people were just looking at the daily like, oh, it's a hammer. No. It's a Wednesday, right? You potentially have a lot of people that on Wednesday are looking at, okay, how is the weekly going to close? And you can see that weekly already starting to form. So you're going to start to see a lot of people cover and get out of the way of that early, just in case you see a short cover rally on Thursday, Friday. That's exactly what we saw. We saw a big gap up. We saw a big continuation bar. This is probably the Thursday of people saying, oh shit, I need to get out, right? Especially for those that didn't see the candle already in the weekly on Wednesday before the close. Thursday, they definitely saw it and they got out quick. And then today, obviously, you saw another form of that where it pushed out, but then it did ultimately start to sell back. Now, this was a huge trade. I think at the peak here, even for how bad my ad was in this area, the fact that I just kind of incrementally added here, and then I added more exposure on my swing, or I guess my 1110 contracts, I had a massive day just from Tesla. Now, what I want to see here moving forward, we can just tie this in, is just either a hold of this level, right? We already know how big this 216 level is, especially with it being the previous gap. We know we lost it back here, but if we can hold here, that would be lovely. If not, you'd want to see it maybe pull down at the worst, I would say, to like, this is where it gets weird. I'd want to see the swing low hold right around here, right, 212. I wouldn't be opposed to seeing it maybe come down to this. What is that, 205? That would be worst case scenario. But if we start to lose 205, I might close out those swings. But now how I would draw this is just this, right? I mean, you take this initial swing low, tie it into your gap area, or the initial gap that was here, right? In this area that I used to add or previously added at, and you would just look for it to come down here and consolidate or bounce right off the bat. And I'd be comfortable taking ads here again, and this is what I am planning to do. And then my stop would be under this level. So that's Tesla, guys. Awesome trade. Like I said, the overnights from 11:10, I think they went like 250% or something crazy like that. And then the swings for January went like 90. They did sell off a tad. They're at like 50, 60. I'm cool with that. I'm an advocate for it selling off a little bit more so I can get more exposure to that name. I did mention I'd probably go to the 20-30 contract realm. Right now I'm at 8, which is why I haven't taken any trims on this, and I am looking for this gap up here, guys. I'm looking for the gap. That's probably where I would unload a lot of the position and maybe keep like 5 to 7, 5 to 8 contracts for these swing highs up here, or these lower highs. But that is the trade recap on Tesla. Let's do one more. I don't want to be here all day. I already think this is like a 25, 30-minute video. We will look at Roblox, because Roblox, man, that thing has been going. I wish I still had the Wyckoff schematic. I don't really want to draw it out again. But man, that chart has been fantastic. It's still sitting 80, 90%. And they have earnings coming up, and I think that thing's going to explode. So let's go ahead and look at Roblox really quickly, and then that'll be it. All right, guys, Roblox is a huge one. This is another situation where I've talked about, big names that I think are going to create a paradigm shift in the market, or at least a specific sector, how they will sell off and they will be reaccumulated based on where people think this will go. You got to think Roblox, man. Video gaming is huge, and they're gonna make a huge splash in the VR world. VR slash AI. Meta took notice of it. A lot of people, I think, took notice of it, and that's why I believe we saw this sell-off. It was a reaccumulation based on potential value and the potential growth that can be seen in this space. And we all should know video gaming is a pretty big thing. Roblox at the forefront of that. Even just the coding aspect of things, the thing's going to do really well in my opinion. I think it sees these highs up here, somewhere around like the 42, 45 mark. We won't talk about that though, right? I mean, let's just talk about the area that it gapped down to. Sold off pretty drastically. This was the volume that came after earnings, and I was looking for it actually to come down here. I was prepared for this. If you guys look at the comments section or the share section, I alerted this. I literally bought, I think I bought like 25, 75. I went down a little bit, but I have shares of this. I have family members that have shares of this that we've been in since there. If you guys aren't buying, some of these things at the lows. I mean, I'm not going to give buy sell recommendations. That's silly, but you guys, I've been putting out some heat. My account's doing pretty well. Like this and Rivian are doing very, very well. I'm looking to also add Mara. I think Mara or Riot is bound to return to specific levels. So I'll talk about that for like a weekly scan or whatever. But yeah, I had shares here. I was looking for a recovery over time back to this gap, and really that's what I was looking for, right? Just to return back to this gap here. But I knew it would take some time, so I was looking for some kind of base here in the middle, somewhere in the equilibrium, which is the 0.5 of this range, and we got that, right? We ended up having what ended up being this push down where it had this little cup, and then it created this little lower high here, then sold off, right? And then obviously I got the shares down here, and then it pushed back up, and we got somewhat of our break of structure right around here, right? You can say like in this spot here. Now what we started to see is a newfound range be brought up, right? So instead of being trading or started, I can't talk, instead of trading down here in the lower range, we're now trading up here, right, in this upper range. So we're making a ton of progress from just like a chart perspective, and I love to see this consolidation here. I wasn't too worried about this, breaking under at this point. We had built a really nice bid on this break of structure here. I don't know why it's not showing me price. This is going to drive me insane. If you guys don't know, Thinkorswim is no longer with TDA and TD Ameritrade. They now got taken, or I guess bought out by Schwab, and the transition just happened today. So I like Charles Schwab too. I'd rather be with them than Webull. I was just waiting for this to happen. So they updated all their charts. So a lot of this stuff's going to be looking a little iffy. I'm not going to have things saved. But yeah, now what ended up happening, right? And I ended up taking the trade for Roblox. I don't remember what day. It was somewhere around here. I ended up grabbing, or it was right here, right? I think as it pushed up on this day here, it was at 32.10 or something like that. I grabbed it, and then it ended up pushing up towards the gap. It sold off a little bit, but I really wasn't worried. Once again, it's one of those things, like you have to identify what kind of trade it is. It was an 11.17 swing. I took this back like 10.23, 10.25. So I was looking for this to push down a little bit lower, but not break 29.57. I was going to add anywhere at this lower range and then stop below, 29.57, the daily close underneath. We never got that, so I was adding to this position quite a bit. And eventually we started to see it tighten up here, right? We had this day, this day, this day, this day, right? So 11.1, 10.31, 10.30, right? And then 10.27, all within a very, very tight range at the kind of like the upper range here, right? This is closer to this than it is down here. So we started to see a very, very tight constriction with already a constricted space. Like this is a tight range, guys, very, very tight. We ended up seeing Powell, and obviously that whole thing happened here on 11.2. We ended up gapping up and then running, right? This chart looks so good, guys. So this was a big, big reason that I wanted to take this, is just simply the consolidation at the upper range here after a major sell-off, right? This sold off, obviously accumulated down here very quickly, pushed up, and then just this tight constriction of price. It's gonna get an expansion. I took the risk here knowing that the break of structure would be under the 29.57. And it was very simple at that point, right? Anytime it gets to the lower end of the range, I was adding, and then eventually, right, we had good stuff happen to the market, and it broke over the gap. I would still be okay adding on this name if it ends up like selling back down to retest the gap, right? And then I would be looking to trade it back up there, maybe another higher low, something like that. But we'll see how it ends up kind of formulating going into earnings. Earnings going to be its own binary event. At that point, I could be completely wrong. You know, this could sell all the way back down to the lows. But for now, right, this looks so good. If we go to the 15-minute chart, and the reason a lot of these haven't really been like intraday stuff, it's I haven't needed to do it, right? These have all been swings. So, I mean, just looking at the 15, I mean, just look at how tight price action was. This was, these were those consecutive days of just trading all in a range. And anytime it got to the lows, you guys will notice it immediately pops back up. And I was just adding here, right? And then eventually we closed right around here, 31.84. We get the nice gap up, and it just continues to keep trucking along. So Roblox, amazing, amazing gain. I hope some of you guys took advantage of this. I know Calusa, a couple other people DM me. Man, this thing looks good to fill the gap. It looks good to go to whatever this is because they turned off my price. I hate that. 37.07. I am looking for this to get to the 42.5, so top of this like range here. I know it sounds crazy, but I'm looking for it to trade to 42.5, and then potentially up here with some more time. But fantastic winner on that. Let's go ahead and I think conclude it there. I mean, I can show you guys some losses too. I guess I can integrate these in here. Some of the losses I've taken though weren't really big. I mean, it didn't, they didn't supersede any of the wins. I think a lot of the losses were like, okay, hey, I'm going to take this at the end of the day here just to see if we can get an overnight gap. Good example of that, and I might have to cut this, we'll see, was NVIDIA. NVIDIA was like right, I think it was right here, guys. Like I took it as it started to get back above, I think it was this level here. So it was this low, right? So it ended up bouncing here, pushed up, pushed here, pushed up. This was the lower high where I think a lot of people were like talking shit to me, saying it's going to sell off, calling it a bear flag, which to be fair, I mean, 1-2, right, does look not the best in terms of volume, and it did sell, and it did make a new low, but it still held. This is the craziest part. There's so many pivotal levels here on NVIDIA. And I mean, I would rather not bet against it because so many are betting against it. You have dealers that are super long on this. I talked about it a lot. I don't trade a lot off fundamentals, but a lot of this move up, guys, like where was the major gap up? Was it like the 3? Yeah, it was like the whatever. This entire range, guys. I hope you know that this is all fluff off of AI hype from a language model. None of this has been applied yet. So imagine once you start getting like real world application that's not language based models, you start to see video games that can kind of create themselves, code themselves. I don't really know the technological side behind all of it, but we're just seeing the fluff from, basic ass stuff on AI. We haven't seen deep learning from it. We haven't seen a lot. So I can only imagine if this can go much higher, to be honest. I don't want to go with like, $1,000 PT. I don't know what will happen. I'm not, well versed in that, and I know my limits. but I know for a fact that this was all based off fluff from, language model AI, and that's what the damage it did. It went from 300 to fucking 5. So we'll see what ends up happening. But yeah, this trade ended up having the 2 bar flag here. It pushed down, and this is where I was really interested in grabbing the Nvidia. I think I grabbed it on this day, which is so unfortunate. 10:30, or I grabbed it here on 10:27. I tried to start the swing, and I think this candle stopped me out. And these are what are so painful is when you don't identify what you're looking for in a trade, and sometimes you're trying to force stuff. Oh no, damn guys, that's awful. Thinkorswim just cut out on me, so yeah, I might have to cut the video there. Oh, this is actually still working. Hold on. So you guys might be able to see my cursor, but yeah, I didn't give it the daily close. And NVIDIA, if you guys don't know, the contracts move against you pretty aggressively. So this wick here just kind of freaked me out. And obviously another 2 bar pattern, I thought we'd get a new low. There was the potential we could trade down into this range here. So, I mean, this is one of those things. I got scared out of the trade. It ended up gapping down, or yes, ever so slightly ended up gapping down, and I got shooken out of the trade. Had I held on to this, I mean, one of those NVIDIA trades, I think it was 430, 1117 calls. I had them at like 2-3. These finished at like 900 today or something crazy. So that's why, everybody does it. I know I get a lot of messages about, hey, like, how do I get better at holding on my winners and not holding on to my losers? I talk about it in my video. You guys got to go watch the risk reward video, risk management video. Know what your thesis is and trade the thesis. A lot of people just trade P&L percentages and trade dollar amount on their account. Identify what's a good setup to you, what the thesis is. Is it a swing? Is it a day trade? And I'm not saying don't stop out until because there's justification for everything. Some people hold stuff to 0 at times, and that doesn't work because it didn't break the level. But a lot of the times that I take a trade, it has to invalidate something for me. And if you guys have seen, right, on swings specifically, I will pepper in a contract or two, right? I'll add, but it's not just blindly adding on a swing. First, I identify that it's a swing and it's going to take a little bit of time, and I only add at key levels on daily candle closes, right? Day trades, same thing. I'll add on 5 15-minute candles. If it doesn't invalidate me and the 5-minute closes above, but I'm down 30-40%, I'll add another contract. I'll add another 2 contracts, etc., until it invalidates me, right? And that's just kind of how my thesis is, and that's how I trade. But remember, this is all, you guys can pick and choose what you want to take from me to develop your own edge. I think that's the most important thing here. I try to really teach patience in understanding price action, where price action is going to go to, right? And then being able to develop theses based on higher time frames and your lower time frames. But yeah, this was a good example of one that I got stopped out on. There's a QQQ one that I could review, but end of the day, I think I just took 2 contracts. I don't really think it's anything crazy, but yeah, very good week for me. We'll pick up where we left off next week. I'm super excited for November, December, January. This is the hottest time of the year, and there's a lot of good setups that we're going to be able to capitalize on. A lot of PEGs, pegs. There's a lot of daily/weekly charts. There's just so much that's going on, guys. So really excited, especially for those that are brand new. For those that have been in here, this is my favorite time to trade. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next week.